Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 19th Radnor Township School District Curriculum Committee meeting. And first on the agenda are introductions and administrative remarks. Dr. McQuiggan.
Great. I have a different microphone tonight. Thank you very much. We do have two very robust presentations tonight, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But just a quick announcement, we've done a lot of the updates regarding school start time at the Curriculum Committee meeting, so I wanted to remind everyone that there's going to be a presentation next Tuesday at the full board meeting on March 26th. So that's the next step as far as getting that information. And that's it for tonight.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Sarah. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Cindy Spurtle, 106 Valley Forge Terrace, Wayne. Thank you for the answer to my first question, Dr. McGuigan, as to why there wasn't anything about the sleep study on next week, not on the, but I did have a question on the, just on the two quick questions on the sleep study, whether the TransFinder report that you were waiting for has been, whether you received that, which is the cost of the busing, I believe, or the change in any busing, and also in the talks that you've had on the cost of the busing, whether or not you had considered the cost to Mr. Batchelor's old home when they made the change to, made the time change for the start of school, and exactly what that cost was, if you did consider that in your discussions. Getting to tonight's agenda, just a couple, I tried to go through the slides as best I could. I know a lot will be covered. But a few of the questions that I had were on the discipline system, only because there had been some concerns about bullying in the middle school. And so just wanted to know if you had identified modifications to the current system, which is to be done sometime this spring. And will you be sharing those by stakeholders? Does that include the board and the public, which was indicated on the slide? And also, based on prior meetings that we've had over the past years and the writing of, or the writing ability of students of Radnor Township School District, whether or not the writing initiative, which was to begin on the 2018-19 school year, has begun, and any improvements that you've seen as a result of what initiative came forward at the beginning of this school year on the students' writing abilities. Just a couple things on the targets. How are you doing with, you had a target by spring break of this year to have a lot of the standards refined, half of them, whether or not you're on target with that. And have you reached a conclusion on the lottery? There's data that was provided in the agenda, but no conclusions were made, and whether or not that will be presented this evening as to whether or not you feel the system is fair, because that was the whole essence of doing the, I believe, from past meetings, the reason for the study. And you've got, it appears, and being forthcoming with all of these, some of these challenges that have been presented in your technology study. I'll be very interested to hear. One is because of the importance of PowerPoint and Excel to the students as they get later on into 7th and 8th grade, how very important that is, and it appears to be one of the major challenges you have listed. And once again, looking forward to hearing about the cost projections. I remember back in the first meeting, there's a reason. There's two different colors for laptops in 9th grade and laptops in 10th grade for the 1920 year. I can't remember what that was, so that's a question as to what the difference is. And one other question, today I received an email from a local publication, and the lead article was on Shipley's work with concussions. And I know that during curriculum committee meetings that the coaches have come and presented what is being done at Radnor, but once again, since it was highlighted, I noticed that Shipley is working with CHOP on a special program to detect concussion and when a student is definitely should be cleared to be able to play again. And once again, they made the decision back in 2014 to eliminate heading in soccer for the middle school students, and whether Radnor's made any progress on or any decisions along that line. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to deviate a little bit from what I typically do and just say that because we've been working so hard this year on a whole number of initiatives that basically come through curriculum, we are going to have the presentation on the student sleep time at the business meeting, and we don't have time for it to go through the curriculum committee. Because as you see, we've got two other major, almost year-long initiatives that we're looking at today. So just to explain that, and where everybody can look for the culmination, really, of a lot of hard work that's been going on for the entire year. All right, that brings us to the approval of the minutes for February. Committee meeting members? Yep. Okay, meeting minutes are fine. And let's dive right in then to our agenda. So, student trips
Yes, so first would be our board action items. You have a list of things there. There are 2 clubs for the high school, the Culinary Association, and also a club for Speak Up. We also have some gifts from Radnor High School PTA, some snacks for the Extended Learning Program, that's the after-school program we talked about before, and some supplies for the robotics club as well. We have some grants, gifts, and donations from the Radnor Education Foundation, 2 different mentoring programs they're going to be sponsoring. They sponsored a speaker, and then tomorrow the middle school is going to be having Ryan's Story, and that was paid partially by PTO, and then REF also contributed to that. Our middle school Gateways class secured a sponsor to sponsor their T-shirts for the recent Sea Perch competition. So their sponsor donated $350 to offset the cost of their personalized T-shirts for them. Does anyone have any questions about anything on the list for approval?
No, I just want to again thank these groups that are donating to Radnor. We really appreciate what you do for our community.
All right, thank you.
All right. Committee, anything? Okay.
I'm good.
You guys good? All right, that brings us to the middle school. Are we going to do that
Yes,
first?
so
Okay.
we're going to be starting with the middle school tonight. So in the fall, we came to you with a long, long list of hopes, dreams, and goals for the middle school. And we have a large team of teachers and administrators who are here tonight to tell you about all the progress they've made so far. You asked the last time that we reported that we not wait a whole year to come back. So this is kind of our mid-year report. So we're not wrapping everything up, but there is plenty to talk about. So I'd like to invite the first part of the group up now, and then we'll kind of phase through them as we work through each of the goals. Where's my little TV? There it is.
Okay, welcome, middle school representatives.
All right, so once they get settled, we'll ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right in. Doug, you want to start? We'll introduce, and then we'll jump into the first slides.
Good evening, Doug Kent, Assistant Principal.
Tom Hagan, Latin teacher and World Language Department Chair.
Nicole Kindred, 8th grade mathematics.
Abby Daniels, instructional coach.
Jen Campus, 7th grade language arts.
So the structure we're going to be using tonight is, it's structured similar to the report that we did for you earlier this year. Each of these teachers took a lead on one of the different goals that we were focusing on. So they're going to be reporting on the work of a much larger group. But for each one, we have a little slide to cue you that just reminds you what the goal was, what our target was, and then they'll talk to you about some of the things that have happened along the way. We'll start with 1A.
So I was the teacher lead on Goal 1A, and that is more focused on our written curriculum and making sure that our written curriculum and documents are focused more on the targeted standards, specific things that by the end of a unit or a chapter that the students will be working on, tested on, looking for mastery. And then making sure that the rest of our documents follow through with those targeted standards that we identified, just so that the document is cohesive, it's able to, challenge students at their level, which would kind of tie into Goal B and the instruction of that curriculum and making it more rigorous for some, at their own level. So what we have done since we've met with you guys last is we drafted a curriculum checklist. And it's, are the standards targeted? Do we have learning objectives that match? And then going through the vocabulary, the pacing guides, the common course assessments, and then differentiation to go along, with challenging students at their own levels. So once we created the checklist, we worked with our Goal 1A committee. We met with our curriculum supervisors, talked to department chairs, so really had, all the stakeholders involved. And after that, we gave the checklist to the departments to complete at their grade levels, looking at their curriculum, what needs to be done. I collected the data. We have baseline data of what needs to be done at all of the levels for each of the categories. And then we gave the checklist to the supervisors, the curriculum supervisors, who worked with the department chair and vertical team leads to develop a timeline that was both manageable for, the department to refine, revise, that would fit within our, 2.5-year plan by the time they had the checklist. So I can say for all of the core departments, so math, science, social studies, language, English language arts, and integrated, all of those timelines have been developed, which you guys have seen. From there, what we're working on next is creating a SharePoint using our Office 365 and trying to come up with a strategy to house all of our curriculum documents, because right now they're housed on what's called the J drive, but that's not accessible for anybody at home. So if you're working or looking to do any planning at home, unless you've downloaded it, it's not accessible to you. So if we use an Office 365 format, you can access it anywhere, but then also creating something where people can share resources, materials, activities, things that worked well for them, put our common assessments on that. So it's more of, we're hoping, a collaboration tool so that, teachers can talk with one another, share, and really have all of our materials and resources in one place instead of, 3 or 4 different places like they are now. So that's where we're looking to develop that SharePoint, what it's going to look like. I can tell you that we've already talked with department chairs. Some teachers have already used something like this. There's a 6th grade department that is already using it, trying it out. So we're talking to them what's worked, what hasn't worked. And our hope is by the end of the year to have this drafted, put into place, and share it out with the staff to hopefully start next year. So that's kind of where we've come, where we're going in terms of the rest of this year. Just to give you an example of the math timeline, I can talk about that specifically just because that's my subject area. So the math didn't have a lot to do. We had some refinement in terms of the standards. We've had several vertical team meetings this year where we've been able to talk about and accomplish some of this. So I can speak for Matt that we've already done the standards, we've refined the student learning objectives, and we've adapted our pacing guides in terms of what we've talked about last year, where we're going this year, do we need to slow down, speed up? So we've already completed 3 of those tasks. Before PSSAs, I know it says March, but we're now looking for before PSSAs to hopefully have a vertical team meeting to talk about vocabulary across the multiple grade levels. So I know all of the subjects have been starting to have vertical team meetings across the different content areas, so we are on track to, meet the timelines that have been set out. By the end of the year, we're also hoping to have all of the encore checklists and timelines developed as well.
For Goal 1B, this is the instruction goal, and it does go very closely, match very closely with curriculum. And as Nicole said, we have been meeting together, even though we are focusing on separate goals. The Goal 1B is more focused on engaging students in the challenging and differentiated learning experiences. If you think of the Goal 1A being the curriculum, what's written, the instruction is how we deliver that curriculum in the classroom. Our first task was to come up with a unified vision of rigor. In order to do this, we looked at some of the mission statements that we already had within the district, within our student handbook, and we did a lot of research and different educational texts and online to see what exactly or how did people define the word rigor. I think most people found that they preferred the word challenge, and we did develop a statement and decided that the best way to present this would be in commitment statements that were focused on teachers, administrators, parents, and students, because they are all very much involved in creating that rigorous environment. Rigor can be created through the student engagement, the materials, the instructional design, and the classroom environment. So how could we bring all of that into one thing? At this point, we have drafted those commitment statements. We stuck with 4 for each of those stakeholder groups, and we're in the process of having teachers, parents, students, and administrators review those statements and give any feedback, making sure that there's nothing in them that's out of line of what they would expect in the rigorous classroom as well. In tandem with that, we have had 3 cohort groups already begin, or one group has already completed the professional development with the Pete Grandy group that is happening, and the focus is on differentiation. So that's very closely tied in with how you develop that rigorous classroom and what that looks like. How do you provide assessments and instruction at varied levels to meet the needs of all of the kids within your classroom? To be completed, our next task, now that we do have these commitment statements, which become sort of the basis for what we're calling a framework for peer observation and reflection. So we want to develop a process for teachers to observe each other, confer and collaborate with each other, and gain some building data on what we're seeing in each other's classrooms. We're going to use the information that we have in the commitment statements to sort of create a rubric, I'll say, that they would use as they do the peer observations. That might be the focus of their conversation with the teacher they're observing either before or after. It would really be up to the teachers who are working with each other for the peer observation. Conversations here are very early. The goal was to have the framework built by the end of the school year and possibly pilot it with a group of teachers in the fall to see, in reality, the timing of it. Sometimes things sound really good and look really good on paper, but then when it gets down to doing it, it's not so easy. So the hope is that maybe we have a framework that we can start with in the fall with a group of teachers, and then maybe in the second semester, branch it out to the rest of the faculty.
Would you like us to ask questions as we go or hold them till the end?
Do you want to wait till the end of number 1? This is just group 1.
Yep.
And then
And then Goal 1C is addressing the encore or elective classes, along with that the world language classes. This goal very quickly sort of divided itself into two separate areas, one more, a little bit more leaning towards the world language classes, and one more a little bit leaning towards the encore elective classes. So the first thing we did was for the world language, since I'm the chair, I can speak to that a little bit better, is we reestablished our vertical team, and we had a great meeting in the end of November. And in that meeting, we discussed something that came up in the program review, which was that students found that there was a bit of a disconnect going from middle school to high school in terms of that word rigor, in terms of the challenge. So we discussed that between the middle school and high school counterparts of the world language department, and we had some really good discussions on that and talked about how to make it a better continuation and a better flow. But to also help that, we redesigned how we recommended students for the high school language classes to better suit, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, to better address the challenge aspect of it. We came up with this really awesome little questionnaire that actually one of our Spanish teachers had come up with last year, and we used that and modified it, and it was great because for the spoken languages, we were able to say, okay, if you want to go to honors, here are the expectations, and they would list those. And then I modified it a little bit for Latin, just to say, here would be the expectations for Latin, and I think that really helped this year with the process of recommending students for the high school. And we'll have a meeting in April with the World Language Vertical team again to sort of see how that goes, see what our enrollment trends are, and things like that. In terms of the electives or the encore classes, the first thing we did was we actually started to look at, what are our neighbors doing? There was a feeling that the students that were surveyed in the program survey questions, they thought that they didn't have, the classes didn't align with their interests, that they felt that the things that they were interested in maybe weren't reflected in the choices they were offered in the middle school. And so the first thing we did was we looked at our neighbors and said, what are they offering? What kind of choices are they offering the students? And good news is we actually found that Radnor Middle School offers one of the more robust program offerings in terms of classes we offer, as well as just choice. The fact that our 8th graders get to choose 2 electives, 7th grade going into 8th grade, is something that not every district around here offers. In fact, I emailed a guidance counselor from one of the districts, I can't remember which one, but at the very bottom it just said at the end of the email, there is no choice for students, period. It's very almost like Darth Vader-y. And so that was great. And that's not to say that we can't improve or we can't change things, but that means we're off on a great start. We start on a great step. So as we move forward, the first thing we want to do, if you can move it to the next slide there. As we move forward, the first thing we want to do in the pretty near future is we want to ask the 8th graders, the current 8th graders, about their electives, about their encore classes. What do they like? What would they like to see changed? Is there something that they really enjoyed in a particular class? So we want to ask that of the 8th graders now, because they've gone through 2 encores as of the end of the 2nd semester. We'd like to do that actually again with them towards the end of the year, then once they see their other 2 encore classes. And at the end of the year, we also want to ask the 7th grade, because then the 7th graders will have gone through the full offering of 6th and 7th grade encores, including both Tech Ed Design and the Tech Ed Computer class as well. Then once we start to get that baseline data, we can begin to share it with the other elective classes and discuss, where are things that maybe we could change either in the curriculum. Is there a course that maybe we want to offer, or is it more that we can adjust things within courses we already offer? I think, and the last point there I think is important, is as we begin to look at those decisions, we want to make sure that, for lack of a better term, that we're not stepping on the toes of our high school counterparts. We want to make sure that if we offer something in the middle school, then when they go to high school and they do the same thing, the teachers up there hear, oh, well, we already did that in middle school. So we want to make sure that this aligns vertically with our elective courses throughout the district.
Great.
All
So
right.
that's the end of Goal 1. If we want to go
Okay.
back and do questions around.
Yeah, I have a bunch
this.
of questions, but I'll throw it open. You guys have anything? Okay, so my... Okay, Thanks,
Oh,
Chuck.
boy.
Okay. I don't know if this is an easy answer, but you mentioned, I guess it was Abby, defining rigor or challenge. Can you tell us what you found, or is it like too broad? It kind of.
It's very broad. We did a survey of teachers, and in the survey there were questions that asked them to kind of check all that apply. What do you think a rigorous classroom would look like? What does rigorous student engagement look like? And then there was a box at the end where teachers could enter their own comments. And there was a lot of teacher feedback saying that they just didn't like that word itself. And I think it comes from the etymology of the word, thinking of rigor mortis. You know, it has a very strict and stern, words in the definition, and that was not the learning environment that they were wanting to. Yeah.
It is a Latin root.
So it was just sort of looking for a word that was not as harsh, I think. Okay. So challenge, we thought, and we have a district goal about challenging all students, so it kind of worked that in there too.
Okay. So can you define challenge, or that is
I
the
think
four
it's
commitment statements are going to be?
Same meaning. Yeah, the idea of meeting students' needs where they are. I think we'd mentioned before that rigor is a difficult thing to. You can't put a single number on it because it's going to vary depending on the student and the situation.
And if I can just add in, I apologize, I'm slowly gaining my voice back. The idea here, too, is that it's giving teachers the opportunity to re-spark within their curriculum and their instruction to make sure that all levels are providing adequate challenge, because we don't want to hone in on just one particular course. We need to give our students appropriate options for their level. And when we redefine challenge within each course, then we're providing that opportunity and not putting a child where they would not be able to successfully rise and grow.
Okay. My next question, I guess, this is probably also Abby's area. So how receptive do you think the staff is going to be to peer review?
I think it's going to be mixed, and that's going to be something we're going to have to be very wary of in our conversations about what it might look like. That's why we talked about possibly doing a pilot, so that the potential pitfalls or problems we could hopefully encounter with that pilot group, who will hopefully be open to possible pitfalls. So I know that there will be some people, and I've talked with some teachers who are very excited for it. I've had some teachers, they've seen it, and they've said, when are we starting this? I can't wait to do this. I worked in another district that did it, and it was great. But I know that there will be some hesitation. Some teachers will not like the idea of another teacher coming in to observe. So we're going to keep all of that in mind as we develop that framework, so that we can make sure everybody's getting the most that they can out of it and focus on what is the purpose of it.
Yeah.
It's not for me to go see what Nicole's doing in her class to then critique. It's really to build that reflection and collaboration among peers.
So are we going to give the teams sort of resources to train people that are going to be peer reviewers? How to do that effectively?
We actually do have some. The TLS group that we're getting the professional development from, they have their own framework, so that's something that we can start with. And teachers, as they go through the cohort, they are engaging in that process with the coaches that are coming to the building from Pete Grandy's group. So everyone who has gone through the cohort will have some experience with what that looks and feels like. The only difference would be that the person they're meeting with is someone they work with, as opposed to an outside coach. So I think that's a starting point for us, because this isn't something new. There are a lot of frameworks out there already. We have some neighboring districts that we've already been in touch with to see what they're doing, what works for them. And that's really what, in this spring here, we need to figure out how we can maybe combine all the best parts of these things to work the best for us.
I really admire that you've gone that direction with parts of this. As a teacher, I look back and some of the best professional development was sitting in the back of the classroom of other teachers, and I wanted to see in that building, you know, I knew who were the really strong teachers, and I wanted to be in their classroom and learn from them, and I think that's a great opportunity to not only build you know, an opportunity to look at best practices, but a real opportunity to build collaboration, and it's something that would be nice to see in the building.
Well, and that's what we're hoping to do with that, you know, Office 365 resource of pooling resources together, really building that collaboration aspect. So maybe it's not as scary for, you know, a teacher to have another teacher come in. If you've already collaborated with them, you could see how maybe they present a lesson or an activity or something. So we're really hoping to just build collaboration, and then it won't be as, oh, I don't know if I want you to come observe. If you're, you know, open to sharing and, you know, feedback and responses and reflection, you know, I think that's what we're looking to build.
Yeah, so I actually had a question because I heard Abby differently, Ms. Daniels differently when she talked about it. I thought you were saying it was kind of observation and collaboration. I get to come see your class and learn how you're doing something. And you said peer review, which implied to me, I'm going to come to your class and I'm going to take notes and come back and tell you what I thought you could have done better. And I'm assuming it's actually a little bit more of a 360, like, hey, I loved how you did this. I do it this way. Do you think I could incorporate parts of that? And then it's kind of a, you know, do you want to come see it when I teach it kind of thing, and give me feedback, and then collaboration more like that, as opposed to, you know, one person's going in to give the other person feedback.
I think so, unless the person being observed specifically wanted that critical feedback, and they would specify that. There would be a before meeting between the two teachers, and the idea was that the teacher that's being observed would have something that they might ask the person observing to focus on during the lesson. And it may not be their instruction per se, it might be student engagement or classroom management. And then that would become a focus for the observer to watch and look for that in the duration of the lesson, as opposed to just watching what the teacher's doing the entire time. The other thing, again, these are all, none of this is set, these are just things we've talked about, was that for teachers who are doing an action research plan, if there was a new strategy or technique that they were trying that year, maybe they wanted their peer to observe them using that technique. The feedback that could then be something they use and reflect on in their ARP as they write that up at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad this conversation took place, because that's what I was trying to get to, was if we can present it as the idea that this is an opportunity to get in there and see how maybe somebody else did it, you know, with the spirit that we want to help each other. This is, you know, we're all working together to make things better. So it would be more like a school climate, you know, approach. So I'm pleased to hear that that idea is out there, that that's what you're going to do with that. So I'm just curious. And then I have a question about, this is for Mr. Hagan.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that some of the districts came back and said, you know, no, you have no choice in middle school. So I'm curious if you know what the things are that they're teaching. Because like we used to have, so you had, I'm calling it home ec, I don't know what we call it.
Oh, FACS, yeah, Family Consumer Sciences.
We had that, and then we had shop. They have a new name for that. And so I'm just wondering what the other schools have that they insist that you take.
In terms of their subject offerings, they're pretty similar to ours. You have your tech eds, which would be your computers, or that's your kind of more old school traditional wood shop, but now it includes also some computer design and even using the 3D printers, things like that. I know Mr. Chris Kelly at the middle school does a lot of things with that. Then you would have art, which is pretty similar across the board. You'd have a language, and the number of languages offered varied from district to district. You would have music, and that was where the biggest change was. In certain districts, your music class was your instrument, was your band or orchestra. That was your actual class. And in certain ones it was general music, or that was the widest difference. Again, I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that was one of the bigger differences. Mm-hmm. And then again, there was fax, and the way that they would do it was they would kind of design it so that in one year you would see these courses, and another year you'd see these, whereas we're a little bit more, you see every course, both 6th and 7th grade, and then you get to choose in 8th grade.
Yeah. Okay, I was just curious.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm glad that we, have the things that everybody else has, but better.
That's the hope.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I'm happy that we also do. Trying to be funny. Now is it on? Okay, thank you very much. One thing that we are crunched with all the time is time. Okay. For instance, we have vertical teams. How often do the vertical teams meet, and roughly how many people are on the vertical teams?
We just reinstated the language arts vertical team, which I'm leading, and we have established monthly meetings.
Okay.
And those monthly meetings are for half days. So one meeting a month for 3 hours.
Okay.
And then I would say we have a representative from each grade level, and then we also have a representative from special ed, gifted, and our literacy coach. So, and our reading specialist. So we try to have all necessary stakeholders in order to make meaningful change regarding language arts and the writing and the new writing initiatives.
Right. Now, how does that tie in with the high school as the vertical goes up?
So I can speak to the math because I'm the
Sure.
math vertical team leader. So we have 2 5th grade to bring to have the transition from elementary to middle. We've got 1 from each grade in the middle school, 1 special ed, and then we have 2 math teachers from the high school. So we've expanded. We've always had middle school and high school in math, but we expanded to 5th grade this year to try to bring in that elementary transition. And the math vertical team this year has met 5 times, but we do full days. So I tried to spread them out throughout the year, but we meet a full day.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good.
That's
good
a
to
lot
know.
of time.
Now, peer observations, how can I connect that to teacher evaluation? Because that would be, I think it's a grand idea, and I like the spirit of it, and I think it's great to all work together and everything else, but there are realities that we need to face, and, one is the evaluation of teachers, teachers coming into the classroom. I was a classroom teacher. I invited everybody in my classroom, if you're there to help me become a better teacher for the kids I serve, and if you're there for another reason, I would prefer you get out, basically is how I would address that piece. So I'm sure that what we're trying to do is to come in and to gain knowledge, the people who are coming in, and to share knowledge with the people who we're doing it with. I'm just trying to get my head around how this is going to play out as far as an evaluation would go with the official evaluation of teachers, where this sits.
Totally separate. The evaluation piece of our teaching staff would still take place with all of our administrators, whether it be central office or building level. So the peer observation would simply be our teachers working together in collaboration, really towards best practice, but totally separate from the evaluation piece.
Okay, so we're crunched with time for teacher evaluations with the administration. How are we going to get times for peer teachers to get into classrooms and observe and reflect and collaborate? When is that going to happen?
So
I don't need specifics now,
Sure.
but I'm just saying, as we move forward, these are the things that I'd like to know.
Yep. Yeah, and we can certainly look at what other districts do, because other districts do this, K through 12 peer observation, and
Oh,
look,
yeah.
look
No,
exactly how they
it
do
can
it.
be done. I would just
sure.
like, because if we're going to do things like that, that means there's something else, because we're not going to create more time in the day. So there's something else that we're not going to be doing. So I want to see what some of the trade-offs are with that. So we don't really have to go into that right now. Now, my next thing is, luckily for me, I've been substituting in a competitive, although not quite as uplifting as Radnor, as a competitive district.
Don't risk your job there, Mr.
Not mentioning any names. But one of the things that I found really, really interesting was they do a self-directed learning component within a class where the kids self-direct something that they're interested in. They have to research it, work together, collaborate within it. Then they have to present to the class themselves. And I found that an interesting piece. And Mr. Hagan, when you talked about some of the students not being engaged that much and we're trying to get some interest of what they may be interested in, that's a good way to find out as teachers, to find out what your students are interested in by having them present some of the things that they're interested in. So I just thought that, that I would share that. And the other piece that I really would like to see when you talk about reflection and things like that, this is kind of a little bit off the wall, but when the kids come into a classroom, it would be great for the classroom teacher to say, hey, what classes did you guys just have? Share a little bit on what experiences you had, just a little bit. And I know we're constrained with time, but if we can begin to understand what they're bringing in, because we compartmentalize our education, and if we need to have the kids understand that they're learning and what the importance of learning is. Like, for instance, I was Italian teacher today, which after I said hello, that was about it. So, but what I did was went around and asked the kids, how many of you have been to Italy? Why are you studying? Ask them questions so that they could then reflect back. So I'm in full agreement with what we're trying to do here. I just want to make sure that if we are going to do it, as I have said before, that we prepare it and we put it in a way that it's going to be accepted and it's going to flourish. That's all. So thank you very much for all this. Appreciate it.
Okay. Go ahead, Sarah.
So, thank you all very much. I know this is a lot of work, and I know it's your evening that we're taking up. I did want to say, Chuck, or Mr. Madden, that, I'm sorry. No, that certain of the classes, obviously in a middle school, lend themselves more to individualized learning. But I know that both in 7th and 8th grade, they participate in National History Day in the Social Studies program, and each student does pick, I mean, within a framework, they do all pick their own projects, and they're responsible over almost the course of an entire year for doing all the individualized research on that and bringing it in. So they do get to pick something that's of interest to them. Right. And I think that, I think it's a little easier to do that in social studies than maybe math. I'm not saying we don't have some math geniuses there who could go out and, come up with a new theorem, but, I do think that they do make an effort at that in certain programs. I guess the question I had for you, Ms. Kindred, and maybe it lends itself to Ms. Campos's answers as well. As part of standardizing the curriculum within a grade, within a subject matter, obviously we're not asking the teachers to turn into robots and everybody teaches the exact same class every day, but, as the parent of a middle schooler, I hear anecdotally one parent saying, my kid hasn't written in December, my kid has only written one paper all year, and another kid who's in, what's ostensibly the same level class has been writing a paper every other week, and it was writing, sorry, Maureen. but how do we know, is part of this going to help encourage some kind of standardization of the skill sets they're going to have at the end of a year? I'm not saying, everybody should walk right in and have to write a paper in every subject, but maybe by the end of the year they'll have had comparable experiences in terms of what they've been expected to do. And I know math is a little easier to standardize than maybe language arts, but that's why I'm wondering.
I think that the most important part is that it has brought attention to the communication that we need to share with parents, because I think that writing occurs daily in all of our classes. Mm-hmm. It's just that with technology and with wanting to be privy to your family time and be respectful of that and what they're doing at home and limiting some of the homework to what's just really essential, most of the writing occurs within the classroom. However, it has broadened our communication in ways that we're going to communicate with parents to let them know what is going on. Because ultimately you want to see progress in your students' writing, but in middle school they're not always willing to share with their parents. So part of that is helping us helping them communicate with you more effectively on what they are doing in their classes. So while we align to all the same standards per grade, and what we've done Abby's been helping direct with the classes, is we've begun to truncate our standards to the most essential per unit so that we're really honing in and looking at what's most essential for the student to learn and master. We're then deciding how to translate that into common assessments, common core assessments that are meaningful writing products, whether it be timed, whether it be process, and then again, how to get that back out to parents. As a writing teacher, I want to own the writing. I want all the writing done in class that I can answer. I can help alleviate any questions or concerns. But it did bring up the idea, am I hovering it up a little too much, in my class and not sharing the final product out as readily as I had believed I had. So I think that communication piece you'll begin to see rectified and getting that communication out to parents about what is happening.
And let me apologize if it sounded like I was accusing anyone of not doing the writing.
We don't.
No, but it is sometimes a perception. I know.
But again, the perception was we started like shaking our heads, and then we're like, oh, look, they're doing all their writing online, or oh, they're doing this, or we're not having them go home. So again, it just broadened the conversation, and it allowed for us to try to figure out ways to communicate more appropriately with what is happening so that you know what skills and you know what conversation to have with your students. So again, for me, it was more of, okay, then we need to be clear, and that's not a problem ever to be told that and to reflect on it. So.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and just, to go, all of our curriculum documents do have a learning objective section in them, and it's what do we want the students to know, and what skills do we want those students to leave with? So all of the curriculum documents have that learning objective piece, and that should be common across every classroom. Now, how the teacher delivers that may be different, but all of the skills, knowledge, objectives for our curriculum should be standard among all classrooms.
Thank you.
Okay, I know we're wrapping up this section, but I just had a couple things to say. First of all, thank you once again. And a lot of things that I was thinking to mention have already been mentioned pretty thoroughly. So. But I just want to mention a couple of things. So as an educator myself, I know, like any professional, good, solid, actionable, supportive, good faith feedback on how to improve your practice is golden. And so I understand that that is something that is, it's really struck me. I have it highlighted and underlined here, a framework for peer observation and reflection. Really interested to see how things go with that development. Be very interested to see how things go. And a note that I had about that earlier, as you were talking about the J drive for the curriculum docs, is, it can be, that's part of an organization's, let's say, daily work really, is to create an environment where people feel comfortable sharing knowledge and establishing trust, and that's something that every organization has to do. So very interested to see how things go with that. And finally, just one thing very quickly that came up in our planning meeting that I think was a very important point, and something perhaps to address to anyone who might be watching or listening, is that this time for kids is very important for exploring interests. And I know that teachers, I know you're nodding your heads, and this is something that is, I'm sure, very top of mind for you. And it's just something that I would just encourage as an educator myself, that this time for kids is extremely important for exploring interests, developing interests. And I think it's really an important point to emphasize for parents to allow their kids a little bit of free rein to explore interests and to encourage interest to germinate and to grow. So just something to mention there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to number two.
See, is there a room? That was me chopping off a few
All right, you want to introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump right into goal area 2.
Terry Canny, I teach at 6th grade at the middle school.
And Ryan Butterbaugh, assistant principal at the middle school.
Thank you.
So the second area of the goal is climate and culture. Communication, climate, and culture. We broke that into two parts. 2A is communication. That's what I'll be speaking to. And Part B, at least initially, we had two parts, climate and culture, Jen will talk to. During the surveys, I think we presented in September, there was a couple different elements of communication that were under question. One was parents like, where do I find this information from? I'm bombarded by not e-school, but different e-minders and all this stuff, and when do I really find out what things are going on? And one of the key areas was clubs. And another key area was homework and Schoology and how people were posting to Schoology. So clubs, we figured we could do that pretty well. We created a club board so students would know what clubs there are in the middle school, when they meet, who's in charge of them, that type of thing. We directed parents to the idea that on the website there's a little banner that says clubs available and they could go to that. The Schoology one required a little bit more tweaking. And what we found was that a lot of people were using Schoology to post homework, but they weren't posting it in the same method. So parents, for one, looking at my course, could find the homework this way, but they had to use a different way to find the homework for Jen's course. So as a staff, we standardized it, and we post homework one of two ways. Both will result in the homework assignment appearing on the child's calendar. So when you look into Schoology, look at the calendar, you'll see all their assignments for the week. And we have some feedback that that's working quite well. So we're going to continue on with that. In terms of communication issues within the building itself, there was some thought as decisions were being communicated to some people, but not everybody getting them at the same time, and it was kind of creating this kind of whisper down the lane, did you hear this, did you hear that, right, type thing, which was never its intent. It just seemed to feel that way. So there was a couple things we did with that. Faculty meetings, we kind of came up with, we stole something from you guys. We did like a consent agenda almost. So all the housekeeping things, the principal would send out. And then if you had any questions about this.
You need to set a different bar, all right? No. If people had questions about like the housekeeping type things, they could direct those to the principal. The principal would be able to gather those and answer them right at the beginning of the meeting, which prevented a lot of, I don't understand this, or why are we using this schedule instead of that schedule? So we could streamline that and really use those faculty meeting times to communicate best practices, to look at some things that we did for program, just other things would be more in the line of professional development as opposed to just announcements, right? So people are feeling like their hour after school was an hour well spent instead of an hour listening to something they could read in an email. So that was one part. As far as communicating decisions and how things get communicated and when they get communicated, one key thing for making life a little bit more easy for us is administration has said emails will come till like 5 o'clock. Nothing after 5 o'clock until the next morning. So nobody's finding something out because they looked at email at 10 o'clock at night when somebody else didn't look at it until 8 o'clock. So you didn't get the information. You're getting it within that 9 to 5 framework, which is great. It is nice, I'll tell you. It is nice.
Should have
I was going to say, feel free to steal that one, everyone.
And weekends.
And
nothing
weekends.
on weekends either. And then, you know, as far as other things, we did then a focus group. Because the survey said there was trouble with climate and there was trouble with communication, but you can only get so much out of the survey. So we conducted some focus groups around 3 areas: discipline, culture, and communication. And what we found was there's a lot of overlap. There were some communication issues within how, when we found out about a discipline referral and the result of the discipline referral and those types of things, maybe some misunderstanding of how the process actually worked on the faculty part, or perceived differences between administrators and how they did that. So we're working to streamline that a little bit, and that from that communication, and it was also part of culture, that's why you now see 2C, right? So we moved it out of an action item and moved it into a goal. So that was able to help with that part of communication. The other part is just, you know, teaming. Some things it's just a reality, right? we won't know how many people we need until we know how many students we have in front of us. So some of those things about, what grade you're teaching, what subject you're teaching, that has to be a little bit fluid. So we're still working on ways that we can communicate that more effectively. To do for parent communication and the rest of it as we're moving forward, we're looking for like a flip chart type thing, so that if I'm a faculty member and I want to know how should I announce this, it will have a little flip chart. So to do this, use the website. To do this, use Radnor Reader. Send out a blast, whatever, email to your class. Likewise, that flip chart would have a use for parents. So where would I find out about this? You would check the Radnor Reader or those types of things. So that's something that we're looking to do in the future. We'll also do a follow-up survey to see how we're doing in communication, to see if there's improvement and where we might go from there.
You answered everything I had to address,
Perfect.
so we're good.
Thank you.
Because look, it's 6 o'clock.
So for culture, I think culture, you can possibly see how culture wraps around into every goal area that is addressed. So first and foremost, we had to re-examine our instruction and curriculum so that we as professionals make sure that we are equal stakeholders in some of these decisions that are made that directly impact ourselves, our teaching pedagogy, and just our day-to-day encounters with the students. The communication, again, as Terry had pointed out, they directly affect the culture of a building. If the students are unsure, if the teachers are unsure, parents are unsure, administrators are unsure, it causes a lot of questions or confusion. So I think that the way that we're reorganizing and realigning many of our systems will help to rectify some of the issues that were mentioned with culture. What we did was we took the results from the parent surveys, the parent focus groups, and the student survey, student focus groups, and we tackled some of those bigger issues that we saw as consistent trends between all three, and we shared out with the staff. We then took the staff and we took their input after them hearing those critical points that were mentioned, and we generated a teacher survey. The online survey was administered in November. Again, as Terry pointed out, the survey was a brief survey. The first set of questions were all multiple choice in the sense of always, some, almost always, right. So, and then we had some open-ended questions at the end. And what we saw when we looked at the trend really matched nicely, surprisingly, with not surprisingly, but matched up well with what we saw parents conveyed as concerns, students conveyed as concerns. And we took all of that to really hone in on behavior, discipline, communication, and culture. We took those three issues and we developed staff focus groups in January. And we set 3 different meeting dates. We had a staff lead it, a staff note take, and then we put that information together, shared out with the entire program review committee. And through that, we really realized that something that popped up in all 3 areas pretty consistently was the middle school behavior and discipline, and that we really needed to highlight and address what did we believe to be our mission as far as behavior and discipline, and how we're going to rectify some of the situations that parents brought up, students brought up, and staff brought up. So that led us to decide that we needed to actually focus and add on to this focus group 2, goal area 2, to a goal 2C. So a committee was formed for that, and they've already started some work, and this should be a pretty short-lived committee. We're hoping that within this spring, everything, we're going to use our current behavior discipline information that's in the handbook, and we're going to look at the levels of infraction and I believe Dr. Kent is going to continue on to give you a little bit more because he's on the committee. But again, the culture, just prior to going to that, the culture is going to be reevaluated yearly, and we also want to administer another survey at a later date to parents and students once we've had some time to implement the strategies related to instruction, curriculum, and communication. And we want to see if are all stakeholders noticing and recognizing positive growth and change.
So before I dive into 2C, I just want to take a moment to thank our team. We're truly blessed to have the professionals that we have, and I think the folks that you heard from today, it's just an example of the excellence that we have and our students get to experience every single day at the middle school. I truly believe that it's staff second to none, and we've done a lot of work in a short amount of time, and we couldn't have done any of it without the dedication of the teaching staff that we have. They are truly dedicated to making sure we do what is right for children every single day. So I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for all of your work. So with discipline, we're very fortunate to have an expert in the house, and Dr. Denny McKnight, who...
I was always on the other side of discipline.
He still is.
Who actually, Dr. McKnight redid an entire disciplinary system in a local school district in Delaware County. So we're definitely we're fortunate to have him helping lead us down this path of looking at what we do. So we have had one meeting already. We have another one scheduled this week. We have a number of teachers who volunteered to jump on board from all grade levels, all disciplines, to really look at what we do, what we can do better, what we can tighten up if need be, and we're going to have some recommendations, working together as a team that we can move forward with. And as Mrs. Camp has said, it's not going to be long and drawn out. There are things that we believe that we can do pretty quickly that can satisfy some of the concerns that have been raised. So moving on to goal area 3.
Can I just make
Oh,
one
yes,
request?
I'm sorry.
I think it's great that you guys think you can solve the disciplinary issues quickly. I hope you do. As a middle school parent, I would just ask that you have that committee ready to reform if it's necessary. I think that if it was a primary concern of all of your stakeholders, and I hear anecdotally it is, that it should be definitely something you are not just saying, okay, we got it fixed and walking away. Make sure you're keeping an eye on it, and that the corrections you put in place stay there and stay.
So I will add that this
keep the
is
evaluation.
certainly. I will add that this is a K through 12 look through the wellness study as well. So it's not just a middle school thing. So it's going to be studied through the wellness initiative as well. So it's certainly going to get different looks from different angles as well.
And I would just add that the last phase of the process is implement, monitor, and modify. And that'll be a continual process of doing that.
Can I ask a
quick question? Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
My question is related to that, and it's you said with the wellness, because we're looking at, it's a budget time and things like that, and the counseling component, and whether or not we have enough staff to take care of the 339 plan, to put in place. See, discipline is, like you said, just one part of it. And what we want to do is to really keep children away from that. And we do that with other programs that we put in place. So just to throw that out, this is a great opportunity for us as school board members to say, let's put our money where our mouth is, and if we need additional personnel to ensure this, let's make sure that we do that. That's all.
That's a quick question. Any modifications to disciplinary protocols or regulations, will they be included in the handbook for the fall?
If there are changes to be made, they would come potentially for board approval if it, obviously relates to policy. But yes, would absolutely be updated.
Okay.
All right, should we go on to number 3?
Are there any questions for number 2 before we release? Or
Else, did he have anything before we move on? Okay, number 3.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question about the people on the team. So are you volunteers? I mean, I know leaders of, you know.
Mr. Batson did offer to babysit our kids once.
I mean, I can see
Then they didn't invite me back. One time.
this is a tremendous amount of work, and you guys are the energy, you know, that's leading this and changing this culture. And so thank you so much for your dedication to this, really, all of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Okay, so moving on to goal area 3, which was our other action items. First, we were looking at instructional time and making sure that we are very cognizant of how our instructional time is used. Things like the number of assemblies we have. We've worked with the PTO to make sure that we only have 1 per quarter. We used to have more than that in the past. And really making sure that, again, that our time is fully utilized. We did vet one alternate bell schedule. At that time, the decision was made to stay with our current bell schedule. And obviously we're very attuned to the sleep study if additional changes need to be made as a result of those recommendations. So we're fine with that moving forward as well. So we decided that we would stay with our current structure, our current schedule. If you've been around for a little bit, the Radnor Middle School bell schedule has been discussed, frequently, I would say. And, we're in, I feel like year 4 of the same schedule, and people are, satisfied. You don't hear people talking about the schedule anymore. Okay. Because we don't have a new schedule every year. So it's good that we have found something that works for us. And again, if we need to make adjustments and tweaks to it, due to the sleep study recommendations, we certainly can do that, and we feel comfortable doing that. So next slide, please.
Thank you.
So the lottery system, integrated lottery system. So 2 things we were looking at was, number 1, opportunity, and number 2, transparency. And, so we do have some recommendations, as far as the actual transparency when the lottery is held. We are going to invite a board member to come sit with us, as well as a representative of the PTO, to sit through that process, which hasn't occurred in the past. And the actual programming of how we run the lottery, we're going to do it the same way. It's a computer-generated system. But giving access to folks to actually see what that looks like in real time. So that was one thing we did as far as transparency is concerned. And we did look at the numbers, and I think you have that somewhere in your packets maybe, of over the years of opportunity and weighing all the pros and the cons. The decision that we made was we were going to stick with the current system as is. We feel that as far as opportunity for students, that we do a good job of offering opportunity. All 4 of our programs are very different. And we are looking at things that we do in our integrated programs that we can move to some of our traditional teams. So student-led conferences would be an example. Trying to expand things that we know have been very successful, that we've heard from parents are very successful, project-based learning, and moving those types of opportunities into some more traditional learning environments. So that's another thing that came out of that as well. Mr. Kearney, Dr. Kearney, excuse me. Go ahead again.
Sorry,
thanks.
got one
That's
more.
okay. Okay, so we've talked about this before when we presented our course of studies, and this is opening access. Dr. Babson was talking about a little bit earlier, where kind of growing, taking a chance, and in this first year of open access, in talking to staff members, we felt it was important to put a limit on it, because we also, from a social emotional standpoint, we don't want kids just be totally overloaded. So we felt that this was a good segue in year one, and we can evaluate as we're going through of giving students an opportunity to wave into one being either social studies, science, ELA, that would be in 7th and 8th grade, or ELA in 6th grade. And again, evaluate how that is going, how many students are taking the opportunity to waive in. Our criteria still exists. It's really the minimum criteria that's been removed that will allow people to override in. So the accelerated courses still will be very challenging because that criteria is still there, and the high expectations are still there. We're just giving students an opportunity who may not have had that opportunity in the past because they couldn't meet the minimum criteria.
And the last two slides talk about cross-district connections. We started talking about these things when we looked at the initial study, that we anticipated there would be some overlap. And, you know, what's really nice is as we start to talk about these initiatives, we hear how the wellness might overlap. We talked a little bit about how Schoology and technology and the work we did there has made a difference with communication. Doug ran the calendar committee this year. We looked at opportunities for additional instructional minutes. Initially, we had talked about the writing initiative, and we anticipated that was going to overlap here as well. I'm going to ask Jim to talk about that for just a minute, just because we had a question about it, and give a little update on what's happened this year with the writing initiative.
Thank you. Thank you. So in October, we came to the board meeting and presented our goal with writing and the action steps we're going to be taking throughout the year. So far, to date, we're on track with the timeline and the different items that we said we would be doing. Specifically with regard to professional development, including for the middle school, Paul has come in and worked with our teachers during the August and February in-service days, and has also done some model lessons for grade levels. We've sent teachers to a variety of workshops, including some at the DCIU, one with Penny Kittle and Kelly Gallagher, and that was for middle school and high school teachers. Our instructional coaches are engaged in coaching with grade levels and also individual teachers. And then specifically to the vertical team, where some of the work is also being done, you heard a bit about it. We've have a meeting coming up next week where we're continuing the work on our writing benchmarks, the rubric we're using to evaluate that writing, and continue that conversation about how do we help parents understand both the writing that's taking place in the classroom and also the expectations for those students when it comes to writing in the classroom as well. So the communication has been part of that conversation and is ongoing.
Thank you. So I think we have time for maybe a couple quick questions if we have them. I wanted to make sure we get to the technology numbers today because we've put Byron and Chris off for about 4 months.
Hopefully this is a quick question. Do we know if there's students who have gone all the way through that have been denied getting their an integrated course? Because the reason I ask that is we used to have a weighted lottery. So if you got Crossroads, then going into the lottery for Watershed, if you didn't get it or you wanted it, you got it was weighted so that you had a higher odds of being picked in the lottery and so on into 8th grade. And I don't know how many kids never got in, but do we need to consider weighting it if that's happening?
Well, certainly. There's a total of 160 seats possible. You know, if you had 40 in 6th, 40 in 7th, and 80 in some classes are as big as 320 like our current 7th grade. So yes, you know, just the numbers alone, students would apply and not get accepted. The handout was included, has some of the numbers, and Dr. McKnight and other folks have worked on it too, just gives some of the breakdowns about how many actually applied versus enrolled. And one of the things that's kind of interesting is that, you know, with the numbers just mentioned, that 8th grade has about 240 students. It's unusually small, and 80 of those students are currently enrolled and integrated. So about a third of the current 8th grade class does have an integrated experience now. And you can see some of the numbers, like in sounding, where 67% of those that applied are enrolled. And then that excludes those that denied, that were given the opportunity but just chose, for whatever reason, not to move forward with the opportunity. So, but to your point and question, yes, never have the opportunity.
So there are students that never got a chance. So
Correct.
Do we need to go back to a weighting system so that, you know, if you're coming to 8th grade and you tried for Watershed, you tried for Crossroads, you never got it, that you'll have a higher
There were still students under that process who wouldn't have gotten in as well. There was no guarantee.
No, of course, because it's a lottery,
Right.
but you
So
still
there were,
have
even with
more.
that weighted program, there were still students
Yeah.
who may have tried all 3 years and never gotten in.
I've asked a lot of questions about this topic and
I
trying to
don't wanna take
understand
much
it.
time with it, yeah.
And I'll just say that one of the things that they have shared with me, and I think the building and the administration has been very thoughtful about this, thoughtful about the changes over the years. And when they did the weighted, the problem it created is students would hold on. So students then wouldn't enter in because they would hold on because, maybe they wanted sounding, so they wouldn't enter the lottery until that 8th grade year, or they wouldn't enter it until 7th grade.
The reason I asked the question is because I know that, but I see 91 kids were denied Crossroads last year, so that's clearly not a problem anymore. 91
But those
of
same
them-
91 could have gotten into another program another year afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yes, but
Because it's not.
I'm saying it's not going to be a problem if they hold on for Watershed, because there's 91 of them that didn't get it. Anyway, you see what I'm saying? Anyway, we can talk about it later.
The one thing I have, and through our parent focus groups we're recently doing, conducting with our search for a principal at the middle school, through our other surveys and focus groups with also our kids and parents over the last year. The one thing I have tried to understand is, are we at that right balance where our community understands that these are choices and that, integrated isn't for everyone, accelerated isn't for everyone, the grade level option isn't for everyone. These are all choices. And I sense that there's a little bit more within the community of a balance of understanding of whether this is the option, depending on, we talked about challenging all students and the individual needs of students, what is right for those students in any given year, whether they want to enter that lottery or not. And I think we're doing a little bit better job of families and students understanding that. And also the piece that's been interesting too for me to understand is the amount that apply, and then actually they may get it, and then they choose not to go into it also. Yeah. So they're pulled off the waiting list as well, and there's a pretty large percentage, some years more, higher than others, that takes place. So I think we're doing a better job of educating what these choices are, and it's not necessarily a ranking. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think just the fact that Dr. Kent had said that what we're also trying to do is take some of the processes that are in place and spread them around the other classrooms. So we're taking the best experiences that those kids are getting, and we're allowing them to get that in another setting within our school system. And I like that.
That's a two-way street too, because there's it is a two-way street, because that's where we're finding, because there's best practices happening at all those other places as well that we're learning. So
I'm sure we're going back and forth with that too.
Exactly.
But I'm just saying that our kids can experience some of that in a regular setting that we have. That's all.
All right. So thank you very much. This is also a lot of work. So thank you for keeping the ball rolling there.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it. And we have a really important topic, and we're going to take due time that we need for it. So come on up. We have deferred this, I think, 4 months in a row now. So we are doing this. This is our long-awaited report on our technology study.
So we're going to, as I mentioned in the board update last week, we're not going to spend a lot of time going through the PowerPoint. We're really going to focus on some of the numbers. But when we made this commitment last year to the one-to-one devices at the high school, we intentionally left it open-ended to be a full-service laptop so that each year we could look at all the opportunities available to the district and make a decision based on what's best for us in the current market. So I just gave you a couple reminders in the PowerPoint. Our overarching goal is to reduce that number of devices in the district, which, as we knew last year, was just huge, and to increase the quality of the devices, and we want to make sure that those devices are new and fresh and functioning well for our students. I gave you an update on the technology goals. It's in writing. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. These are the 4 things we had our teachers really focus on this year: transition to Office 365, and it's great to hear of them talking tonight about how that's part of the way they do business now. We are in the cloud, so if we decide to make a change from one year to the next on a device, It's easy to do because all of our files and the access that our teachers need is in the cloud for us. Schoology is something we're working on K to 12. Again, they mentioned that tonight with regard to communication and homework, and that's really been successful. And then our high school teachers this year did some piloting with the Apple MacBook Airs at the high schools, not with students, but as their own devices. So you'll see our overarching plan is to have iPad carts K to 2 with a ratio of 2 to 1 in a classroom, so 1 iPad per each 2 children. We're piloting Chromebooks this year with the intention to move to Chromebooks for grades 3 to 8 on a 3-year refresh cycle. So we would have every 3 years at the elementary and then every 3 years at the middle school. And then again, we'll talk about our full service laptops at the high school, and they would be on the 4-year refresh, which of course is the number of years students in high school. This is just to let you know that our Chromebook pilot is going on across the district. We have classrooms, we have special area teachers, we have science, and then also our 6th grade. So we have lots of Chromebooks out there in the hands of our teachers. Mrs. Kornman's class has been doing some action research around their Chromebook experiences. They're one of our pilot classrooms. They're tracking problems they've had, suggestions they've had, coming up with hypotheses, charting times, letting us know that maybe our office subscription might have expired. We should check on that. So they've been really involved, and they'll be doing a research report actually at the end of the year, letting us know what they learned through their piece. So I gave you a few lists here of kind of the pluses and the minuses from different groups regarding Chromebooks. Overall, it has been a fabulous experience. Implementing them, managing them has been great. Our teachers who are using them love the fact that they have the touch screens, they have the world-facing camera, so it almost can function in the same way the students were used to using an iPad. The limitations we have right now are really just based on the fact that we're piloting just Chromebooks. We didn't open up Google, we didn't put extensions on. In some of the classrooms, they're not hooked to printers yet. So we're not maximizing the capabilities of the machine now as far as the pilot goes. So particularly in our elementary classrooms, you know, they're not printing and those kinds of things. But we're trying to use Schoology, so you know, we don't want to do a lot of focus on the printing everything too as well. So Radnor High School. So Radnor High School, as I mentioned, we had the MacBooks in place this year with our teachers. We have the same goal we had last year, reduce the number of devices and increase the quality. We came to you last year with this shopping list, and this is the list we used to decide on the MacBooks for the teachers at the high school. You'll notice down at the bottom in red with a little green new, one of the things that has come to light this year is that being able to interact on screen with text is much, much more important than we initially thought it was. We knew that everyone loved notability, but we were sure that, you know, the great idea, the MacBook, lasting a long time, being durable, you know, not getting viruses, all those types of things outweighed that. And what we found this year as the move to the MacBooks came closer for our students, there was more and more concern about that as our teachers started using them and some of the struggles they faced with the transition. There was more concern about that. So we brought our committee back a couple of weeks ago, and we added that piece. And what we did was we talked about some of the successes. Obviously at the high school, they've still done all the things related to the Tier 1 expectations. So we've got the Schoology in place, we've got Office 365 in the cloud, those types of things. But one of the challenges we had was how are our students going to be able to interact? How are our teachers going to be able to use a touch screen if they want to interact with students on a screen in the classroom as part of their instruction? We talked at our most recent meeting about some of the updates from the field. So an issue last year when we finished up with our committee, our number one recommendation from our committee was to go with the Microsoft Surface. And when we did the calculations at that time, it was just cost prohibitive for us. It was just too expensive. And it was fairly new. We worried about durability, things like that. Since that time, the cost of the Microsoft machines has gone down. The cost of the Apple machines, conveniently, has gone up because some changes that Byron can talk about. The touchscreen thing is a big piece. And then also some of the challenges that we faced this year with regard to using the Apple device and on the system and managing the devices and whatnot. So we brought our committee back for another experience with the Microsoft machines. We had both the Surface Go and the Surface Pro available to the committee. We went through our shopping list again, and we kind of redid everything we did last year as far as gathering feedback from them. So Byron's going to talk a little bit about the financials, but just to give you some background going into that, in your packet, you have a couple charts. The first one shows our family contribution, and Byron will be referencing this when he goes through the numbers. So in the first column with the red number at the bottom, we're talking about the device and the services that we are looking to provide for our families. And then in the other three columns, you're going to see the retail numbers. So if I were a mom and I wanted to buy my child a MacBook Air, what would it cost me to create that same technology experience in my home? And just, you know, to take a look at the bottom lines there, you know, we're talking about family contributions around $550 as compared to $1,600, $1,100, or $1,300 to come up with the same pieces. Those obviously are not our costs because we get some discounted rates that Byron will talk to you about as well. So you'll see here we've got some general numbers around educational pricing, and Byron's going to talk to you about what that would look like if we went into an investment at that level over the course of the years. So you have the chart in your PowerPoint, but then you also have a separate one that's on a handout that I think is probably easier to read and has a little extra information on the bottom. Okay,
all right.
Go.
Thank you, Maureen. So if you look at the chart that you have here, you'll notice that the devices are broken up into 4 groupings. There's K to 2, there's grades 3 to 5, grades 6 to 8, and then a high school grades 9 through 12. And with the second column shows the suggested quantities based upon the student enrollment that we know of today. And if you'll notice that, let's take the first line, for instance, for kindergarten, we're looking at a quantity of 160 because, and these would be iPads, because we're looking at a 2-to-1 ratio, 1 device to 2 students to share. And then on the column that says device cost, that's the total cost of ownership for that device. So an iPad would typically cost us right now $497. That would be to buy that device, to purchase the apps, to get the cables, the chargers, you know, all of the associated parts that go along with it. So in moving forward, and if we just focus just on K to 2 for now, if we were to go forward with this for the beginning of next school year, we would look at repurposing some of the iPads that we already have to fulfill the need, you know, for the first year going into this for 1920 school year. But then moving forward, we would need to look at beginning to replace those iPads. The reason being is that as time goes on, those devices are not able to be updated to the latest version of the operating system. And then some of those devices that we have are already, at this point, going into year 5. So we wouldn't want to push them too much past their useful life. So what we would be focusing on would be to each year bring in a new set of devices until we get to the 2023 school year, where at that point, all classes from K to 2 will have a device that would be no more than 3 years of age. Now, the iPads are a little bit more of a sturdier device. We have a pretty good track record with them, and we know that the useful life of these things could run about 4 years. So we will be looking at doing a replacement schedule of every 4 years for iPads, and you can see what the cost associated with that replacement would be moving forward. Now, I did this projection out to the year 2026-27 because I thought it was important that we see what the long-term view of this is going to be and what the long-term costs associated with you know, moving into a program such as this. Again, it's not to say that the students will use the same machine from year to year. It's just that, you know, the easiest way to show this would be that every year we will be adding another grade until all of the grades are going to be serviced for grades K to 2. Going into grades 3 to 5, we're looking at a Chromebook 1-to-1 model, beginning with the 1920 school year, which will be beginning in this fall. And starting with grades 3, Our cost for 320 Chromebooks would be at a total cost of ownership per device of $360. And that would be a total of $115,200 per year. And as you can see, each year we would add another grade until we would have all three of those grades, from grades 3 to grades 5, already outfitted with Chromebooks. Now notice when we get to the 2022-23 school year, we would be looking at refreshing the original purchase of the Chromebooks that we would buy for this year. We estimate the Chromebook usable life should be about 3 years. And again, you'll see that that progression goes out to the 2026-27 school year. Moving down to the middle school, again, focusing on the Chromebook 1-to-1 at a quantity of 320 Chromebooks at the same price of $360 per device. You'll see that in the 2018-19 school year, the current school year, we're already in a Chromebook pilot that has been working very, very well. So we would be looking at adding another grade next year, and again, that cost would be fixed at $115,200 based upon the current pricing. And then the following year, for years 2020, 2021, adding the 8th grade, which would be another $115,200. Then you see the cycle would continue again all the way out through the end of the 2026-27 school year. Now we get to the part that gets pretty interesting when we get to the high school. If we were to look at doing the 1-to-1 and looking at a full-service laptop, and in this case we're focusing on the Microsoft Surface Go device, we would be looking at quantities of, and again, on average our grades run about 320 students per grade level. At our cost per device of $320 per device. And that would be because of the parent contribution associated each year with utilizing the technology. The other aspect of this is that at the end of the term, when the students when they're done with the device, if they're a freshman coming all the way through the senior year and graduating, they'll get to keep that device. We wouldn't want that device back. So when you look at the delta between what the parent contribution would be over the course of those 4 years, added to that the $320, which would be our cost, we're getting up to a average device cost that would be like somewhere around like $865, which would be the total purchase price. That would be the price of the device, the keyboard, the pen, a case, and very importantly, a 4-year protection plan. Now, that 4-year protection plan will cover 100% for 2 accidental breakages. After that, then we'll have to talk about how we handle that, but up to 2 times we can send the device back to Microsoft. Within 24 hours, they will send us another device in its place. So if we were to go forward with moving into 9th grade with this device, our average cost per year would be $25,600, looking at financing that device over a 4-year period. So each year as we collect the parent contribution, we can make the payment towards the lease purchase cost, as well as the small portion of our payment as well, too. So at the end of the 4 years, the device would be completely paid for. The student would own that device. And when you look at the cost associated, and Maureen showed this previously up on the, I think it might be up on the, yeah, there it is. What the value is, the value, if a parent went out to do this on their own, would be spending well over in excess of $1,000, to purchase exactly the same thing. But because of the discounts associated with what we get as a school district, we're able to provide, this extra value at a much reduced cost. Now, when we look at the 10th grade students, the reason why we're looking at a higher amount for our contribution for the first year is because we're considering the fact of starting with grades 9 and 10 at the same time, which means we would only have a 3-year term to pay for that device. So our cost is going to be more associated with that. Now, we can talk about, and we have had some discussions about how we could make sure that we equalize the payments between grades so that families that are have children that are going into the sophomore year would pay the same for the device if they were going to keep it as students who are freshmen. And if we were to, to start for some reason with doing all three grades, 9, 10, and 11 next year, then we'd have to look at some type of a graduated, price at the end. So if the family wanted to keep that device, then they would pay the residual fee that the other students, that the freshman students would have paid if they kept it the whole 4 years. That's just one possible model. So as now again, this current model that we're looking at, really takes into consideration the fact that we're looking at least for now, continuing with the iPads for grades 11 and grade 12 into next year. And then we would phase those out as we go along. So when you look at the totals associated with doing a program like this, we're looking at what would be an average spend of approximately $505,000 a year. In order to make sure that we would have devices that would cover all of our students. No device would ever be more than 4 years of age old. And particularly when we look at the high school grades, when they leave us and graduate, that would be a device that they would keep. In addition to that, you'll notice that there's related hardware costs of approximately $50,000 estimated for each year that we're figuring. That might be for the purchase of associated like cables or printers and things like that we may need to purchase as time goes on. The other thing that I was compelled to include in this price projection was the possibility of tariffs. And as you probably heard, there's talk of tariffs that can range anywhere from 10 to 20%. So I'm looking at taking the average of that, which would be approximately 15%, and including that number as well. Because if we're faced with that, it's going to be a hard cost that we're going to have to be able to carry. So the other part of this is, we're looking at a model that would not only keep our technology fresh, but also something that we believe is financially sustainable. And when you look historically at our spending, going back actually 10 years on average, this spending is reducing the cost of just the one-to-one technology, just in two cost sections of our technology budget that only specifically speak to student devices. Of reducing that on, from on average of about $350,000 when you compare what we spent in the past 10 years compared to what we're projecting to spend in the next 8 years or so. And so we believe that when you look at what we've done historically compared to what we're forecasting to do in the future, the model should be financially sustainable. If you have any questions?
I do have a question. I just want to make sure I'm thinking through it.
Well, could you go back to the cost to district? Because I have a sheet that says to be determined, and I see you've determined it.
Okay.
So, and then I just want to get that down while you ask your question.
So the question I actually had kind of relates to that in some ways. So I'm looking at the chart for K through 8. So you estimated what you're going to need based on assuming we're going to have a class of 320. I'm assuming, but I could be wrong, so you never assume, that, for example, for Chromebooks next year for 1920 for the 7th grade, if we only had 300 students, you're only going to buy 300. Or are you actually going to buy 320 so that we have them all on the same refresh cycle? I just wanted to kind of, you're going to have to adjust a little bit each year. This is all just neat math, and you're going to buy.
Absolutely, yes, just very neat math. Now, we always look at a residual of somewhere like around 7 or 8% more, because you never know what the adjustments are going to be during the course of the school year, new students who may come in, or, if there's, some breakage that may happen that we need to make sure that students aren't going to be losing, quality time for instruction. So we make sure we have the ability to put another device in their hands immediately while their device is being serviced. But yeah, there would be some adjustments based upon enrollments.
Okay, and then kind of tied to that question, these are projections of what things are cost, but the same way the Mac prices changed this year, we don't have any guarantee of pricing. We haven't managed to sign an agreement that locks in anything for any period of time yet?
Well, the one thing that we can do with regard to the Surface Go is we can lock that price in, by going into the agreement with Microsoft, because we will be looking at Microsoft financing through that, or we could secure our own financing so that this way we would know that this would be at least our experience over the next 4 years. But you're right. I mean, we can't really predict what the future is going to be, but we can only go based upon the data that we know now.
So, as a committee, what are we doing for the meeting next week? Are we?
We don't actually need to do anything for the meeting because the resolution that we have does authorize us to purchase a full-service laptop. We're still in conversations with Microsoft. We have some sample machines coming out, some screen beams coming out, both the pros and the goes to do a little bit more piloting. But we don't want to wait too long because, as we learned this year, the delivery time on devices is forever.
Yeah, and if I can just piggyback on that, that is one of the concerns that we have. If you noticed, at the beginning of this school year, we were really under the gun. All of our equipment came in August, and the purchase orders were cut well in advance. There are shortages that are occurring all over the place, particularly for machines that have Intel processors. We've noticed that in the marketplace that there's been some considerable shortages with those. The other thing is that the earlier we get the machines in, the earlier we can get a jump on getting the equipment properly prepped. Hopefully to have some time to do some professional development, and then also making sure that we can get the school year started off in a very calm manner for a change.
So the decision hasn't been made between the Go or the Pro, is what you're saying?
No, we haven't finalized that yet, and we're still gathering some numbers regarding selling off some of our old equipment and what we expect to get from that. So we'll still be tweaking some of these. But, as far as the survey that we did with the committee afterwards, I mean, we had 18 people whose preference was for the Go and 2 people who were still pointing towards the Apple machine.
But nobody wanted the Pro, or are you including those Go
Susan
Pro?
wanted the Pro. No. Well, the Pro. So the
Go saves us a lot of money.
Well, and it's designed for schools. But the idea is, we want to get the students' hands on these 2 devices because the good thing about the Go is it's similar in size to the iPad that they're used to carrying and things like that. But the Pro is more in tune with a laptop. So that would be more what we would get for the teachers, obviously. But the question is, are the students more in favor of the portability, the iPad that they love to drop in their backpack, or more of the laptop feel of a broader keyboard and a little bit larger screen?
And if I can also add, the Surface Go was about 1 vertical inch larger than the iPad that they had previously. The keyboard is designed so it could feel like you're on a full-size keyboard. There's a really neat video that's out that Microsoft puts out that shows this machine in action in classrooms. And, it was sort of designed with education in mind for the portability and the fact that it's a full-featured 100% Windows 10 laptop. I mean, you don't lose any functionality between the Surface Go and the Surface Pro. It's just the size and the fact that it was really geared towards folks that are in an active environment, and particularly those in the education environment.
The other issue we have with the Pro is, you can see with the pricing is, we'd be talking another $70 per student per year. So that would mean, inflating our parent contribution up to $200, or raising our contribution, which is what we're trying to get down.
Yeah. So I have a suggestion, because this is a huge initiative that you guys have worked really hard on. Do we want to have this be part of the board meeting next week? Because I'm not sure we've given, there's so much here. I'm not sure we've given a fair background to all the work that went into this. And the other thing I'm thinking is I want to make sure that parents know that there's going to be this parent contribution and why, and where that came from, that that came out of the focus group. So I'm wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea to put this on the business meeting as well.
I'm wondering if maybe we should think about April, only because we're
Yeah.
still going back and forth with Microsoft, and we need to get some bids on selling some things, and
Right, I just want to make sure that all the work that went in here is people are informed about it. And I'm not sure that happened just because, you know, we had to go through this so fast and there's so much here. So-
Yeah, let us look at it then administratively,
yeah.
because then we can figure out whether next week's the right time. We do have a large
Yeah, it doesn't have to be next
discussion.
week.
Well, and then we have, it could be, but
Yeah.
we have a large discussion item, just agenda-wise, on the agenda for Tuesday. My biggest concern is that we don't think we're at a place where we're looking for board action as much as it is making the board and community aware again, because we already
Right.
took action. But the piece that we're most concerned about is the timing of ordering. So we'll talk administratively about whether or not we can, do an April curriculum meeting or not, or whether we need to turn around next week.
Okay, yeah, and I just want to make sure the parent contribution piece gets back out there and why
Right.
we're doing
Well, a
it.
communication plan will be the
Yeah.
very next step, you know, that's, so once we have the specific information to communicate.
I have a question that has come in about when did the hardware amount get added to the PowerPoint today?
Okay, so that can be during public comment, or do you want to field
Yeah,
that now?
it's just it's the number that came into us yesterday, so I just added it to this particular PowerPoint, so we had it.
So Lydia, I just wanted to make one point, and it sounds like you're all aware of the parent contribution, but I know one of the things we talked about last year when we were talking about this initiative is the fact that there are going to be parents for whom even $140 or $200, if we went that way, would be a hardship. And I hope that we're talking to either some of our, either REF or some other partners, or that we're finding a spot in the budget to help families for whom that is a hardship.
Yeah, we have several options
Okay.
for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is actually a huge initiative, so I think we need to take due time if you have questions at this point.
I don't have any questions. I don't have any.
Okay.
There you go.
I want to throw it over to our high school student rep, because you're on the ground using this stuff. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so I definitely think that the touchability of the screen is a major factor, and I don't know that I can speak to everyone's opinions because everyone seems to have different thoughts on how to use the iPads. I, for one, I don't use them, I know, as much as other people do, but I definitely say that especially with the Microsoft in comparison to the Apple products, it's important to have something that you can interact with, just because it's easier and more convenient to take notes, and it allows you to, it's a more fluid form. So you're able to annotate it, which is, I think, just so important in basically any class. In terms of I was looking over the specifics, and I know that people overwhelmingly voted to preferred the Go, and I would just say that I agree with that as well, just because, I mean, you look at the main difference in the cost between the two, and there's a $400 difference just in the computer itself. And given that most of what we use the computers for in school is note-taking, I don't think the processing power or whatever is causing that $400 increase in the cost of the computer itself is really necessary. So just in my opinion, it would make sense to go for the cheaper option that's designed specifically for schools.
I love that comment. Do you have anything to add, Mrs. McMiniman? Okay. All right.
I want to, thank Maureen and Byron and the whole team and Chris for all their work, and that this is an overall, it's not just the parent contribution piece, but it is also the looking at we talked last year a lot about the inventorying all of the different technology and all the different pieces we had, and it's a reduction as well that is contributing to what is going to be a savings for us within the technology budget. And that savings is not just we're not going to spend dollar, it's an actual, as you look at that comparison, it's bringing that technology budget into a place that is, I think, much more sustainable as a district. So I thank, especially Byron and Chris for all their hard work, and Maureen with all of this. Thank you.
Well, that's why I wanted to bring this back, just to show the thought process and, and that piece, like how much it's going to save us. We're going to have fewer devices, and, the rationale and where all this information came from. But
It's good. Thank you very much.
All All right, thank you so much. And I'm sorry that we deferred you, I think, 4 months in a row.
That's all right.
Don't hold me accountable. Okay, so we're way over time, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have to defer public comment to the next meeting. So this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.